Hello everyone, welcome back to the Stitches in STEM YouTube channel. My name is Michaela and this is podcast episode number 22. If you're new here, thank you so much for joining, and if you are a returning viewer, thank you for coming back. If you are new here, as I said, my name is Michaela and I'm a knitter from Dublin, Ireland. I have gotten a lot of new subscribers since Sarah from Two Pearls in a Pod mentioned the yarn shop directory that I made a couple of months ago now. So if you're coming here for that, the link is in the description box of all of my videos. It's very difficult to find a lot of the more popular European yarn brands in Ireland, at least in person. So like Santa's Garden or Knitting for Olive, Filcolana, Isir, all of those. So the spreadsheet is basically a list of European shops that stock those yarns and also that ship to Ireland. So if you are coming here because you're interested in seeing that spreadsheet, it's linked in the description box of all of my videos. So I hope you find it helpful. The other thing is kind of just specific to knitters in Dublin, which is probably a very small percentage of my viewership, but I do get a few comments asking about knitting meetups in the city, and the one that I would recommend is run by Dublin Knitwork. So I'll link their Instagram down below. They usually have a meetup kind of one Saturday a month, and then I think they do an evening one on one Monday a month. So if you're in Dublin and you're looking for a knitting meetup, I would definitely recommend that one. As I said, I'll just link the Instagram account in the description box and you can go and follow them and you can get updated on any meetups that are coming up. And with all of that out of the way, we can now get into the video. I don't have any finished objects, but I do have a few whip updates, and one of which is a new cast on. And very briefly, I am wearing my Rivendell cardigan, which is my pride and joy of 2024. It's a V-neck cabled cardigan pattern by Sari Nordland, and I heavily modified mine to have the cables a little bit more kind of streamlined within the seams of the cardigan. So instead of a typical kind of drop shoulder where the cable would start halfway up my upper arm, I modified it so that the cable actually started from up here. So it's kind of a half saddle shoulder, half drop shoulder kind of construction. And if you want to learn more about how I modified this, I talked about it in a lot of detail in the podcast episodes where I discussed this. I can't remember the numbers, but it was last year around possibly July to October. If you go through my thumbnails, you'll see it there. And I also have put up very detailed notes on my Ravelry project page for this project. And on the topic of Ravelry project pages, everything that I talk about today, I will link the project pages down below. So if there's anything that I forget or that you want to know, you can, of course, ask me down below, or you can go and have a look at my project pages. I do tend to keep pretty good notes. And with that all out of the way, let's get into the video. My first whip is the Dagmar zipper sweater, which is a pattern by Petite Knit. I am knitting this in Kjellholt's Old Spinnery Kjellholt's Triple in the colour charcoal. It's an Aran weight Danish yarn that's 100% wool, and I'm knitting mine on 4.5mm needles, and I'm also knitting the size small. There's two gauges given in the pattern. One is for the honeycomb stitch and the other one is for the moss stitch, which is worked up on this part of the shoulder. I just did a gauge swatch for the honeycomb stitch, which is 24 stitches and 10 centimetres, and I got gauge on the 4.5mm needles. I didn't do a gauge swatch for the moss stitch, but now that I've been knitting it, I have measured it, and I think my moss stitch is working up at a slightly bigger gauge than the pattern, but that just means that my body is going to be slightly more oversized, so that's okay with me. In the last episode, I was just about to join the front and the back. As you can see, I did end up joining the front and the back, and I worked some of the body. I worked the body until I ran out of that current ball of yarn, and then I took that opportunity to go back and work the collar just to get a break from the body. My instinct would tell me that I have a lot more to do on the body, but when I'm actually measuring it from the back neck, it's not too far off the final length. And I think the armholes are so deep that by the time you join the front and the back, you've actually worked quite far down the body. Sorry, I'm not showing that at all. So the pattern says to finish the body either halfway through a diamond or at the end of a diamond. I don't know if you can see, but I am about halfway through a diamond there at the bottom. And I figure I only need to work one more repeat of the diamond pattern. So I will reach the next half of the diamond and then I'll be able to start the ribbing. So I really don't have that much more to go. And as I said, I went back and I picked up the collar. I worked the collar on 3.5mm needles. So the collar is, it's a folded collar. So you pick up the stitches obviously, and then you knit your ribbing to twice the length that the collar needs to be, and then you fold it down and attach it to the inside. The pattern actually uses a technique to generate a row of stitches that you will attach your collar to. So that row of stitches is generated at the same time that you pick up the stitches to actually knit from. And I don't think it's explained very well in the pattern, but essentially for every stitch you're picking up, you're creating another stitch using a yarn over and you're putting it on hold straight away. So that's what you can see there with the pink barber cord that I have here, every time I picked up a stitch on this side, I had another needle that I was doing a yarn over on, and the end of that needle had the barber cord hanging off, so that as I was working along the collar, these yarn over stitches were working along my needle, along the cord, and then onto the barber cord. And now I just have them on hold, ready to attach the collar to when I'm ready. As I said, I don't think the pattern explained it very well. It took me some trial and error to figure out what it was I was meant to be doing, but I did get there eventually, obviously. I mean, I think this is correct. I could still be wrong, but based on what I think I'm supposed to be doing, I do believe that this is correct. We'll see when I get to that point. The other thing is that the pattern does give a pickup rate for each part of the collar, which I really like. So it tells you the pickup rate for the straight edges and the slanted edges and along the back. So I did follow those pickup rates, but even still, I ended up with 6 stitches less than what the pattern specifies. And at this gauge, 6 stitches is quite significant. It's about an inch. So I was a bit worried that it was going to have a noticeable effect on the ribbed part of the collar. And I debated undoing it and trying again. And if I didn't have to do all of those extra yarn over stitches, I probably would have done that. But I found that quite tedious and I didn't want to do it again. So I just decided to start knitting my ribbing, and I actually think it's fine. It doesn't seem to be like cinching in a weird way. I actually think if I had those extra 6 stitches, it might be too big, to be honest. I know my ribbing gauge is quite loose sometimes, so that probably helps in this instance. But yeah, I think it looks fine, and I'm currently about halfway through the collar, so I need to knit it to double this length and then it will be folded down. I was debating going and doing the sleeves instead, but I figure the way the sleeves sit and the length will be affected by the collar, so I just figure it's probably best to have the collar done first, and then when I go to work on the sleeves, I'll be able to get a better idea of how long they are after blocking when the collar and the zip and everything is attached. I have ordered the zipper from the Petite Knit website. I wasn't really bothered to try and hunt one down elsewhere, and actually it was a lot more affordable than I thought it would be. It was about maybe €5 to €7 for the zip, and I think the shipping was actually more than the zip itself, so I ended up buying some extra barber cords from the website just to justify the shipping cost. The other thing that I haven't really thought about, the pattern says that you need a 23 centimeter zip, so that's the one I bought. But I neglected to even check that my zip opening is 23 centimeters. But I've measured it now, and it's actually about 24 centimeters. I've never installed a zipper in my knitting before. I'm not nervous about it. It doesn't intimidate me or anything. I think it'll be fine, and I'm just going to get it done as soon as the zip arrives. But my concern is the zip going to be the correct size for my zip opening? As far as I can tell, I have met row gauge, so I'm not sure if a zip opening is supposed to be like an extra centimetre longer than the zip, or if the zip is measured from just the length of the metal part, or if it's the like little fabric bits at the top and the bottom as well. So if it can be adjusted to size, would I have been better off going with a bigger zip, and is there some way of cutting it? I don't know. So I'm just going to see what happens when it arrives, hope for the best, and if I have to order another one, I will. It's not ideal, I know, but yeah, otherwise I think it's going really well. So once I've finished the collar, I might go and work on the sleeves. I did end up buying a shorter pair of the CHOW needles so that I could work the sleeves just in the round without doing magic loop. I've had a few people ask me before what I mean when I'm talking about like shorter tips or longer tips. So CHOW and Knit Pro, which are the 2 brands that I've used, and I'm sure other brands have the same thing. They sell shorter cables that are supposed to be used for things like sleeves. So a sleeve is typically maybe 35 to 40 centimeters for me. So I need a cable, obviously, that is shorter than that length. The CHOW cords are based on the length of the cord itself without any tips attached, whereas the Knit Pro ones are sold with the assumption that you have the regular length 5-inch or 12.5 centimeter tips attached to the cord. So the short Knit Pro cord, the one that's suitable for sleeves, it says 40 centimeters. If you were to buy it online or something, it will say it's 40 centimeters, but that's assuming that you have 5-inch needles attached to each end, and it's from the tip of one needle to the tip of the other. The CHOW ones will be sold as 20 centimeters, and that's just the length of the cord. If you try to use the regular length CHOW needles, or in the same thing with the Knit Pro needles, if you try to use the regular length 5-inch needles with either of those short cords, you won't actually be able to bend it in a circle to make your sleeve. So this is the 5-inch tips, and this is a 20 centimeter cord. And if I'm trying to it's not possible to bend it in a circle. It is possible to knit like this, but it's very difficult and it's not very kind to your hands, so I wouldn't recommend it. So what you need to do is get the shorter tips, which are 4 inches or 10 centimeters. These are attached to my collar, so I can't take them out at the moment, but I will just compare the length so you can see. And if you have those 4-inch tips attached to a 20 centimeter cable, you'll be able to bend it in a circle and you'll be able to work your sleeve. So what I mean by all this is that if you are intending to knit sleeves using a shorter cable or knit sleeves in the round, you need to buy shorter needle tips too. So don't be surprised if you just buy the shorter cable and you're finding it incredibly difficult to work the sleeves using regular tips. You will need the shorter tips to make it easier on yourself. So I did buy the shorter 4.5mm tips so that I could work the sleeves on this, because if I had to work these sleeves on Magic Loop, I would despise this project and I don't know if it would ever get done. I try not to buy my knitting tools gratuitously. I try to make conscious decisions about what I'm buying and how much use I'm going to get out of something. I don't use 4.5mm needles that often, but I will really resent this project if I have to do the sleeves on Magic Loop. So it was kind of a no-brainer for me. I want to enjoy my knitting. It's a hobby. I want to have fun and I don't want to torture myself with Magic Loops. So I felt completely justified in buying those shorter tips and I definitely will use them again. I don't use 4.5mm needles that often, but I have used them a couple of times in the last few months alone. So I'll definitely get some use out of them. So that is my Dagmar zipper sweater. I don't really have much more to report on this. It's going pretty well, I think. Actually, there was one thing maybe I should talk about. So I've seen a few people talk about the discrepancy, a potential discrepancy in the length given in the pattern. When you pick up for the front along the shoulder, the pattern says to basically knit your front yoke until it's the same length as the back, and it has to finish at the same row, which makes sense because when you join the front and the back, you need your cables to be in the same position so that it's continuous, of course. A lot of people were finding it difficult to get their front and back sections to be the same length and to land on the same row. So those two things were not working at the same time for people. But I think some people had been measuring from the back shoulder seam and the front shoulder seam at the same point. So they were, for example, show focus. So for example, the shoulder seam is here. They might have been measuring from the back down and then from the front down. What you're supposed to be doing is measure from the back neck here. So if you measure from the back neck down and then you measure from the shoulder seam down, you should get the same length and you should be able to land on the same row. So if you are knitting this and you're having trouble with that, hopefully that will be helpful for you. Otherwise, I really don't have anything else to say about this. So I guess we'll just move on to my next whip. My next whip is my favourite one at the moment. Oh, that colour! Oh my god, I am obsessed with this colour. Okay, sorry. This is my April cardigan. It's a pattern by Petite Knit. This is a V-neck stockinette cardigan by Petite Knit. It's a contiguous shoulder construction, I believe. I was looking up pictures of contiguous shoulder constructions and most of them seem to have a single line and you increase on either side of it. But this cardigan has this band of shoulder stitches and you increase on either side of that band. So I don't know if that's the same thing as contiguous. Once you finish working that band, you actually just increase on the sleeve. And then once you finish increasing the sleeve, you increase on the body and the sleeve like a standard raglan at that point. So there's 3 different types of increasing in the yoke, which I found really interesting. In the last episode, I mentioned that I was a little bit concerned about the sleeve circumference because it was feeling quite tight. I hadn't yet picked up the stitches for the sleeve, but just from trying it on, it felt a little bit tight under the underarm. So I worked a little bit of the body, but then I decided I didn't want to commit to working the body any longer if the sleeve turned out too small and if I had to go back and make the yoke longer or something. So I decided to go and pick up the sleeve just to make sure it actually fits, and it does, which I'm very happy about. It fits really well, actually. I'm amazed at how well it fits considering how tight it felt under the arm before I had actually picked it up. So this is not staying on the hanger. There we go. I've actually already blocked this as well because I have actually finished the sleeve decreases and I'm at the point in the pattern where I should start the ribbing on the sleeve, but of course I want to make sure that it's the correct length. So I did block it, but then I realised I probably won't get a good idea of the length until the button band is done. So I decided to break the yarn for the sleeve and I'll come back to it when I've done the button band. I just wanted to make sure that the length of the sleeve was fine and I didn't want to have a ball of yarn hanging out of the sleeve while I continue to work on the body and the button band. So it does give me a couple of extra ends to weave in at the end of the sleeve, but that's fine. So my plan now is to finish the body, finish the button band, and then I'll go back and work the sleeve. But I am loving this, and I've posted a couple of photos on Instagram, and everyone just talks about the colour. Like, all the comments are related to the colour. I've never had so much interaction just in relation to the colour of my project, and I have to agree, I love this colour. I haven't even mentioned the yarn. This is Sorella yarn. It's their classic sock base held with their silk mohair base, and they're both in the colour Limelight, which came from her garden collection, which was open for pre-order like April 2024 or something. Yeah, I think it was May 2024 maybe. When they posted this colour on Instagram, I just thought I'd never seen anything like it, and that's the kind of the bar I'll set for myself when I want to buy a tonal hand-dyed yarn, because if I can get a similar colour in a commercially dyed yarn that's not as expensive, I will. But I actually went online and had a look at all of the yarn brands that I could think of, and was trying to find any that sold a similar colour to this, and I couldn't find one. So I really felt justified in purchasing enough of this colour to make this beautiful cardigan. I'm so glad I did. As I said, I'm obsessed. I'm enamoured with this colour, and I can't wait to finish this and wear it. It's going much faster than I thought it would, so hopefully I'll get to wear it in the springtime before it gets too warm in the summer. Luckily, my office is one of those that always has the aircon on full blast, so even in the summer, I actually think I'll be able to wear this in my office, which might sound silly, but I promise you, it works. I'm not alternating skeins with this project, at least not every row. I am coming to the end of my first ball of fingering weight yarn for the yoke, and I've decided to introduce the second ball by blending the two skeins. So just for the last 10 grams, I think, or so of the first ball, I've been working 2 rounds in each colours, or in each ball. So 2 rounds of one ball, switching it to the next ball, working 2 rows of one ball, switching to the next ball, working 2 rows, and doing that. I'm not alternating the mohair because I don't need to start introducing a new ball of mohair just yet. I have enough of my first ball, and I also think that if there is any discrepancy between the two fingering weight yarns, that the mohair will help to blend that. So far I think it looks okay. I'm hoping that once I fully switch over to the second ball, there obviously won't be any kind of obvious colour discrepancy. Sorry, my arm is getting sore from holding that up. One thing that I am thinking about is when I received this order, there was actually 1 skein of the fingering weight yarn missing. So I had ordered 4 and 3 arrived, and I contacted them and they immediately sent out a replacement skein, which was great. But obviously then in my head, I'm wondering if there's going to be dye lot discrepancies. The smart thing to do would have been to mark that skein and incorporate it wisely so that any colour discrepancy would be blended. I did not mark that skein, so I don't know which one it is now, and I'm just hoping for the best. So yeah, I think it will all be fine, to be honest. I'm not too concerned about any kind of weird colour blocking or anything. Oh my god, it's so pretty. I just love this colour. I think the last time I showed this, it wasn't really showing up very accurately on camera, but the way it's looking in my viewfinder right now, I think that's a very true representation of how it looks in real life. It's maybe a little bit washed out. It's a bit overexposed, I think, but the actual kind of limey yellow colour is very accurate. So yeah, very happy with this and can't wait to finish it. My next whip, the update you've all been waiting for. My pressed skulls socks. If you're new here, I have taken the pressed flowers socks and I'm trying to modify them to have skulls instead of flowers as a gift for my boyfriend. And the reason that I'm not following an actual pattern that already exists is just because I'm really stubborn and I want to make this work. So that's where we are. Okay, so in the last episode, I had cast on 64 stitches. I had worked one of the skull repeats and I didn't like how the chart was working up, and 64 stitches was also too small. So I frogged that just back to the cuff, because the cuff of the sock is fine. I don't need to change the size of that. I just worked 2 plain rounds where I introduced increases to bring the stitch count up to 72. And then I worked 1 repeat of my skull pattern. I'm going to hold it up a bit closer. Once I moved on to the second repeat, I realised that 72 stitches would not really work for this chart. I don't know if you can tell, but up here, there's the edge of the skull, and then there's one black stitch, and then there's one white stitch, and then that pattern continues across here, and then there's one black stitch again between the kind of this interim pattern and the skull. The way that the chart is working the second time around, because it's kind of offset from the first one, is that I had to have 2 black stitches in between this interim pattern and the skull. When I got to the first row of the chart here, I realised that it wasn't going to work out the same way as the first time around. So I wasn't really sure what to do at that point. I was kind of annoyed at myself for not thinking that far ahead, but yeah, I think it's a simple mistake to make. Whenever I was doing any swatches or anything, I only worked one repeat of this skull chart. So if I had done 2, I would have caught this, but it's not really the end of the world. So I was a bit annoyed at first, but I kind of came to terms with it, and I just figured it's handmade and it looks handmade. It got to a point where I didn't really mind this kind of extra wide black part between the skull and between the white dots or whatever they are. But then I got my boyfriend to try it on again, and it was still very tight around getting it around his heel. Once it's on his calf, it fits, but it is really tight to get around the heel. So I kind of asked him if he wanted me to make it bigger, and he said he thinks it would be best, but then I thought that it might be too big around his calf, and he said he wouldn't mind that, but I think he's just being polite. So I don't know. That would bug me. Like it would annoy me if a sock was too big around my calf and it was falling down. I don't know if these would be too big if they were falling down, because they were like, there was 0 ease, I would say, around his calf. And if I added, I would have to go up to 80 stitches. And if I added 8 stitches, it would add about an inch. So an inch of positive ease around the calf, I just don't know if it's a good idea. I could just do it and see how it works. I really do think that he'd be happy with them regardless. But for my own peace of mind, I would like to give him a sock that fits. The other thing is that I went up to 80 stitches. My chart would work. I wouldn't have to have this extra black part between the skull and between the white dots. So that was an argument in favour of working up to 80 stitches. So yeah, I have hit another stumbling block with these, but at least I know the chart is working now. I'm really, really happy with how the chart looks, actually. In the last episode, I mentioned that I wanted to change the chart because I had a row of 7 slip stitches, which is not great for the structural integrity of the fabric. This isn't a stranded Colourwork pattern, it's mosaic knitting. So the pattern itself is made by slipping stitches. And from what I was reading online, it's not a good idea to have such a long row of slip stitches because you're not knitting the stitches, obviously, and you're not giving that same kind of structural integrity that knitting the stitches would give. After that episode, I redid the chart in a way that I only had maximum 5 slip stitches, which was much better. But I wasn't in love with the chart. I liked it and I would have accepted it if it was the best I could do, but it reminded me more of a human ancestor species rather than humans themselves, because it had such a kind of a flat skull, or like a flat cranium, which is the top part of your skull where your brain goes. So us humans, Homo sapiens, we have a bigger brain than our ancestors from a couple of million years ago. So we have a bigger cranium, whereas our ancestors would have had a smaller cranium and it might have been flatter or kind of more domed rather than going up and around. Almost like modern day chimpanzees, because they also have smaller brains than us. In particular, it reminded me of one ancestral species called Australopithecus afarensis, which had that kind of smaller domed kind of skull shape. I posted a picture of the chart on my story and a picture of the skull that I was comparing it to, and I'll put a picture up here so you can compare them as well, because I think they look strikingly similar. And Sarah from Two Pearls in a Pod replied and she said, lots of little Lucies. And I loved that because Lucy is the name of a partial skeleton of an Australopithecus afarensis female from 3.2 million years ago, and they called her Lucy. And it kind of made me think, if these weren't for my boyfriend and if I wasn't so dead set on making skull socks, I would also love to make little Lucy socks and just have little Australopithecus afarensis skulls instead of a Homo sapien skull. But I do want a Homo sapien skull for these socks, so I redid the chart again, and this time focused on getting a bigger forehead, so it looked like a bigger cranium. And I'm really happy with it now. I actually couldn't be happier. I think it turned out perfect. Even the way the teeth look, I'm just so pleased with this. It couldn't have turned out better. So the chart gets an A1 from me. I'm so happy with it. I did mention in the last episode that I would give it one more attempt before giving up. I know that I do have another bit of frogging and redoing ahead of me, but that's to solve a different issue. So when I was talking about giving up, it was just in relation to getting the chart to work. Now that I got the chart to work, I just need to get the sizing to work. And then after that, there shouldn't be any more stumbling blocks. So hopefully I'll have everything optimized by the next episode. I have accepted by now that these are going to be a longer whip than I'd originally planned. For me, a pair of socks can take anywhere from 1 week to 1 month. So pretty short-term project, whereas I've accepted that these are going to be a longer-term project, and I'm okay with that. My last whip is another pair of socks, which is very unlike me. I've never had 2 pairs of socks on my needles at one time. It's just not something I do. But I just had a notion to cast on a pair of Colourwork socks from the Summerlee Colourwork Cuff Club. So if you're not aware, the Colourwork Cuff Club is kind of a pattern collection by Summerlee, and she releases a new chart every month for a Colourwork cuff of your sock. So it started last August. It's running for 12 months. So you're basically paying for a year's worth of Colourwork charts for your socks, which I think is a really nice idea. I actually haven't made any of the charts yet, which is really bugging me. I don't like having patterns sitting there. I'm sure most of us can agree. You don't like having patterns sitting there that you're not using. I also love watching Smash Knits, who is an Australian knitter, and I love her YouTube channel. She uses the best colours in all of her projects. She's so much fun to watch, and she made a load of socks using the Colourwork Cuff Club charts. And every time I saw her make one, I was like, oh, I really need to get going on mine. So I'm really happy that I finally started. I probably picked one of the toughest ones I could have because it's got 3 colours. For the first kind of 5 rows of the chart, you've got 3 colours, which I've never done before. And to be honest, I'm not a very experienced Colourwork knitter anyway, and I found it quite tough. I actually started these 3 times, so me and socks are not getting along very well at the moment. I can't wait to work a pair of vanilla socks next. Very excited. But I did eventually get past the cuff. I initially worked the Colourwork part on my regular CHOGO 2mm needles, and they were way too tight. Like, I couldn't even get them past the ball of my foot, let alone up to my heel. So that wasn't happening. I then reworked the chart on 2.5mm DPNs, and I made a better effort to keep my floats long, but I didn't actually like how it looked on the outside. So it fit really well, but you could tell that it was worked up on larger needles. I thought the stitches looked really messy. I think what I was doing was, as well as keeping my floats loose, I was actually trying to knit looser as well. So, and you could actually see that effect in the final fabric. So I just didn't like it, and I redid the chart again on 2.5mm needles, but I didn't make an effort to knit loosely. I just tried to keep my floats loose, and this time it fits and it looks a lot better. It doesn't look 100% perfect, but I'm definitely happier with it. I don't know how people get their Colourwork so neat. Like, even looking at the sample photo in looking at the sample photo in Summerlee's photos, the Colourwork looks so neat. The stitches all look perfectly tensioned, and I just really struggle with it. So I'm not over the moon about how they look, but I know it's a learning curve, and I'll accept them for what they are at the moment. I also realised that I wasn't going to have enough of the blue to work the rest of the sock. I mean, of course I wasn't, because I only started with 40 grams. I don't know what I was thinking. So when I realised that, I decided to incorporate another Colourwork chart. So the flowers are from March, and this kind of scalloped pattern is from January. I was actually pretty proud of myself for thinking of that, because I was trying to figure out how I didn't want to redo the whole thing, and I did want to use up that blue yarn that I had in my stash. I'll talk about the yarns in a minute. So yeah, I just wasn't sure how to switch to a different colour for the rest of the sock in a way that was aesthetically pleasing. But I realised that I could use the scallop pattern from the January Colourwork chart, and I thought it would look pretty good, and I'm really happy with how it looks. Actually, I think they're really cute. So yeah, I am just finishing up the gusset decreases, and then it will be smooth sailing, and then I obviously need to do the second sock as well. So I think the second sock will definitely go smoother, because I feel like I know what I'm doing now in terms of my technique and my needle size and all that. I know what works, so fingers crossed that one goes smoother than this one. As for the yarns, the blue yarn that I'm using is discontinued. It's from Hobby, and it's called their Rainbow Sock 4-ply. The yellow yarn is Edelweiss Alpaca 4-ply, and the cream yarn is Filcolana Arwetta in the colour Off-White, I think it's called. So yeah, those are my Colourwork socks. I really love the chart. As difficult as it was to work, I love how it looks, and I already have ideas for other socks that I want to make using this chart. So fingers crossed I just get better at Colourwork. I think it's a good way to practice Colourwork as well, obviously, because it's just a cuff. So it's, pretty non-committal. If you don't like doing Colourwork, you can get it over with pretty quickly. And I just had 2 minor acquisitions, actually 3, but one of them was the Filcolana Arwetta in the off-white. And I also got 2 other colours of Filcolana Arwetta. This one is colour number 255 and this one is 371. So I got these for more Colourwork socks because I realised that I have a lot of scrap yarns in tonal colours for socks that I can use for the actual chart, but I don't have large enough quantities of sock yarns for the main colour of the sock, which I would need about 50 grams or just under, depending on obviously how tall the sock is and how much of the main colour the Colourwork chart would use up. So I don't have any specific plans, but I just wanted to have these in my stash in case I take a notion to make some more Colourwork socks in the future and I need a main colour to make them with. So I just picked out these 2 random colours and hopefully they will become some Colourwork socks at some point in the future. So that is everything for today. Thanks for watching and I hope you enjoyed. I don't foresee having any finished objects in my next episode either. I imagine the 4 whips that I have today will still be whips in the next episode. Depending on the weather, I might cast on something new before the next episode. We had some lovely weather about 2 weeks ago, I think. It was just sunny like every day. It was beautiful out and I had a real urge to cast on something with a plant-based yarn. I think I have 2 summer projects that I definitely want to make this year, but otherwise I don't really do a lot of summer knitting and I'm going to be okay with that this summer. I think last year I put myself under a lot of pressure to knit summer projects and I ended up just not enjoying them as much, and I really just wanted to knit with wool and mohair. But I do get the odd urge to cast on with a plant-based yarn, and I was kind of getting that when it was really sunny here 2 weeks ago. But as for this week, we're currently experiencing our second winter. It has not stopped raining. It's freezing cold out, so I no longer have a desire to cast on any summer projects, but I'm sure I will soon. The other thing is that I've just been very busy in work and I don't really have the mental. I feel like I haven't been knitting a lot these last few weeks, at least since my last episode. It might look like I made progress, but most of that progress was made on weekends, and I usually would knit a lot more on the weekdays than I have been doing these last few weeks. I've been finding that most of the projects that I have at the moment they require a bit of thought, and I just don't really have the mental energy for doing that. So like my Dagmar zippered sweater, I had to pick up the stitches for the collar and I didn't want to do that. I wouldn't have minded if I was like still working in the round on it, but the fact that I had to pick up stitches, I didn't want to do that. Obviously my mosaic socks are a complete head melt, and then the Colourwork socks were also a bit of a head melt, but now that I'm on the foot they're a lot easier. And then my April cardigan is kind of a saving grace because it's just knitting stockinette back and forth. All that to say, I might cast on something else to scratch an itch if I need something stockinette in the round, or if I want to knit something summery, I might cast on something else and hopefully I'll have something new to show you. But otherwise, you can expect to see the same 4 whips in the next episode. Otherwise, thank you so much for making it this far in the video. If you haven't already, please do give it a thumbs up. Leave a comment down below. Let me know what you're working on, or if you have any questions about anything that I showed today, do please feel free to ask them down below. If you'd like to follow me on Instagram, I will also leave the link down below to that. I am very close to 3,000 followers on Instagram, so it would be nice to kind of hit that milestone, but no pressure. I know not everyone likes to get the kind of daily updates on Instagram, so that's no problem. And of course, if you like this content and you want to see more, please do subscribe if you're not already subscribed. So I hope to see you in the next episode, and until then, happy knitting. Bye.